I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery, here to discuss the art of TV costume design with Janie Bryant from 1883, Michelle Cole from Blackish, Kameron Lennox from Pam and Tommy, Hala Bahmet from This Is Us, Ian Fulcher from A Very British Scandal, and Laura Montgomery from What We Do in the Shadows. Now, Hollywood film and TV production were thrown into chaos in the last couple of years because of COVID, of course. I'm wondering, now that we're 2 years in, like, are you settling into the new normal as it pertains to the on-set experience, or has new normal not even gotten here yet? How about you, Laura?
Great question. I think I've done a couple of shows during the pandemic, and that was, it was a big learning curve, especially at the beginning. We didn't know how the disease was transmitted. So I remember, quarantining, shopping for 2 days and being in a full hazmat suit with a mask and a face shield. And now that has relaxed somewhat. I've learned that I don't want to do Zoom fittings anymore if there's nobody from costumes present. I will never again send a rack of clothes to an actor's hotel room and leave them unattended with it. That can go, I've learned the hard way, that can go sideways. But being in Toronto, we have a lot of cast from out of town. So when we were having to have people quarantine for travel, there was, a 2-week period when we were all kind of sitting on our thumbs wanting to get to work. I think what has really helped is that people have gotten a lot better with technology. So even though, I don't want to do a FaceTime fitting when people are totally hands off, I recently got COVID myself. So I had to work remotely, but it did work to be FaceTiming with people in the office. And, like I was able to virtually do my job, which is something that I think had I not had the 2 years of COVID training of working remotely and being virtual and really using FaceTime, it wouldn't have been such an easy transition. And now it's like, okay, we can do this over Zoom. We can do this using our modern technologies.
Kameron, how about you?
Yeah, just recently, Lily James had posted a bunch of fitting photos on her Instagram social media account. And I found it really funny because there's her in her wig and her costume and all these things. And then in the background was me in full hazmat, and you couldn't see my face. And I zoomed in on it and sent the photo to her. And I said, is this how you remember me? I mean, is this your visual idea of what I look like? And she said, yes. And that's the truth with both the shows that I did through the pandemic. Is I realize I have such a close relationship, as we all do, with our actors. But if I were to walk down a street, they would never recognize me. It was it was a realization for me seeing her post. But yeah, I am grateful that things have lightened up a little bit. It makes our job a little bit easier. It's really hard, especially for people that wear glasses, to wear the mask and the shield and all that stuff, because it just gets so foggy and it's so hard to focus. But yeah, I concur with learning the ways to do things virtually has been a huge learning process for me as well. And I am grateful for it, that I'm able to actually do even this, that we're all able to come together on location and be able to do this. So, but yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
I was gonna say, it's almost like letting go a little bit. I found I've had to let go, like you were saying, because my first fitting actually on British Scandal with Claire was, I didn't have COVID, but my main assistant had COVID. So I had to isolate, and it was so stressful, but it was just having to let go and be like, okay, it is what it is. Let's just embrace it. And I think, 'cause I'm quite controlling, hands up. And so that for me was like, okay, that's a massive learning curve. And actually on the job I'm on now, I've been on for a year. I think I've been isolation 3 times. And on one of them, the main lead actress, it was all establishing of all our outfits. And it was like, oh no. But again, it was let go, Ian. And I think I've learned, and that's the one thing I'd say is I've just chilled out a bit, I think. But
Michelle?
I agree with everyone here. It has been a learning curve, and you do give up. You learn to breathe, and you do kind of give up what you have no control over. It's trying to be safe on the weekends. That's a big deal for me. I have nieces and nephews that I adore and I want to see, but I walk my dogs more. I'm around them more. I can do takeout still, so your life changes. You have to adjust, but I think we all are pros here. So, and we love our jobs. So I think we'll do anything to make sure everybody's safe.
Janie?
Gosh, you know what? It was so interesting. I went back to work in August of 2020, and it was before film and television had come back. And a director that I've worked with forever in commercials, he was doing a commercial in August of 2020. And we were really scared at first going back. And I had a full on face mask with a shield with a face mask. And, I was so paranoid, and we were all paranoid. And we were also wearing, the hospital gowns. And I think it was 100 degrees plus. We were out in Palmdale. We were all just like dripping, I should say glistening. Yeah, it was so hot and it was crazy. And then, we've all kind of just adapted our new safety measures, which has been really good because, just with wearing masks, nobody's gotten the flu. We haven't gotten a cold. I feel like it's been a journey for all of us. And we've all learned so much from each other during this whole thing. It's been really interesting. So many, many blessings, many lessons.
Hala?
Yes, I'm not sure if I can add much more. I've had a similar experience to my colleagues here as they've discussed it, with the exception of Janie's Texas experience. That must have been crazy. I just read recently that we did something like 54,000 COVID tests this year on my show. And so that gives you an example of how serious my studio and network are about COVID safety. And we did start out, as everyone mentioned, we started out in our fittings with masks and shields and lab coats and gloves and all of that. And then we sort of were able to peel that back. We would put a complete fresh set of PPE on for each fitting. Of course, our building was also retrofitted and our stages were all retrofitted. While we were on hiatus, they were retrofitted for better ventilation systems. And so that was a good thing that they did. We are based at Paramount. So that was nice. It gave me a feeling of more safety for my crew. But I feel like we all probably do that. Our responsibility as department leaders and leading large teams of crew and working so closely with the actors, I felt really an extra incentive to be much more careful in my private life, my personal life. And I feel like the first time I went out to a restaurant, like in 2 years, was just a few months ago. I mean, I've really taken it very seriously so that I can protect other people on the crew. But it has eased up. What I did find, for people who are more recently required to wear masks, I found it odd for the complaining and the fighting against wearing a mask. That to me was so strange, because I don't know about for you guys, but it only took me only a couple of weeks of wearing. At first, of course, it was uncomfortable, but then after a few weeks of wearing one, now I almost feel naked without one. It became very, very normal for me to wear a mask. And it didn't feel that it was a discomfort to me at all. And so now I'm going the other direction, where I'm starting to go outside without one. And I have to, it's like an adjustment period again to be outside without a mask. But we were very fortunate. Our studio and everybody were very, they were really on it really early, because we were one of the first big TV shows to go back during COVID. And we weren't the first, but we were in that group of guinea pigs of shows to see how what's going to happen, and are we able to go back to normal production? Is this going to be something, or is it going to be just changed forever? So I felt like that gave us also a great responsibility to as trailblazers, to make sure that we did it correctly and that we could keep our industry and our work going safely. And we did. My show really, it's really quite astonishing how well they handled it and how few cases we really had over the course of the last 2 years. It's really something. So yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know where we're gonna, I don't know what it's gonna be like going forward. I don't know if the rules will be relaxed more with other major networks and studios, but I feel like we might be wearing masks that might be something that stays with us for a while.
And one last question. I'm wondering, as costume designers, is there a sort of universe or setting that, if you haven't had a chance to design for, that you really, really, love to design for? Michelle?
I knew you were going to start with me. Darn. My background is, believe it or not, I'm not a funny person, so I don't know how I got into comedy. And but my background is in theater, and so I love doing period, the 1800s. So that's what I studied when I went to college in Kentucky. So that's what I studied, and I have never done any of it. So that's what I would love to close out my career. I'm 65 right now, and I always say if I have one show left that I really want to do, or one play left, I would love to do a period piece.
How about you, Janie?
I love period design. It is truly my passion, and my favorite period for forever has been the 1770s. I love French Rococo, and Baroque period. So that is my dream job. I mean, the men are just as fancy as the women, and I love the wigs and the decorations, and I love brocades and big dresses. So yes, French Baroque and Rococo.
Hala?
For me too, as well. I love period. And I think my least favorite era is Civil War era. I think I'm really not into early 1800s all the way up to like the bustle period. For me, is not that interesting. And I also really am not a fan of Elizabethan for some reason. But what I would love to do is anything from the 1880s through the 1970s. That's that whole span of almost 100 years. I love all of those eras. I love all of them for all their different reasons. I like all the different silhouettes. I like, all how the clothing reflected the changing times for each of those decades and what was going on. I'm sort of a history buff too myself, and so I like the research, and I like to know what was going on culturally, so that and how that influenced the costumes. So yeah, but I think if I had to pick, anywhere from 1880s to 1970s. I'm really not interested in doing, I shouldn't say this, but I really wouldn't, I feel like I've done so much 80s and 90s already. I feel like I want to give that a rest.
Ian?
I would say anything between 1890s and 1910, just because I'm obsessed with the silhouettes from those periods. And I think it'd be really interesting just to almost to a really stylized, fashionable version of like a really contemporary version of maybe 1890s. I'm going to throw it out there. Those huge sleeves and all those satins and all those fabrics and all the lace and all those hairstyles. It'd just be amazing. It'd just be so full on. It'd be fun, actually. Yeah. I'm putting it out there.
Kameron?
For me, I think it would be 1920s to 1970s. I did just spend the last 2 years in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I'm ready to move on as well. But there is something about, especially 1920s and 1930s, that really fascinates me. And I actually, in every job that I do, there is some sort of Easter egg, some sort of something in there from those periods, because I'm just obsessed and get weak at the knees. Some of the stuff for physical, there is a 1920s silk robe that Rose Byrne wears in her kitchen. And then in Pam and Tommy, Tommy wears this 1930s black kimono with these gold fighting dragons. And it's just, I always try to like put something in my shows that really makes it true to me of who I am. And it's definitely from those eras that I try to put in them. But yeah, so I'd say early 1920s to 1970s. I'm wide open. I love period. I love researching it. I love the history behind why we wear certain things. And I love that when you're in a certain period, anything that came before it will somehow have its place in the show. And it's just figuring out how everything is inspired by something that happened before. But thanks.
And Laura?
I mean, I do echo a lot of what my colleagues have said. I've been so spoiled to work in period, the 1890s. I mean, we love doing period. I love doing period. And the research is there as well. And then you can put your own spin on it. I think if it's a good kind of futuristic project that's not too, the uniform stuff, in my opinion, can be quite boring. But if it's very like free and unfettered and it has a really interesting point of view, like a Dune, where you can, be making these really interesting shapes and working with new fabrics and just creating textures and silhouettes, and really just world building, like making your own world that is influenced by certain things, but it can be influenced by the shape of a vase or, a sand dune, something that you see. That's really interesting. The other 90s that I personally really resonate with is the 1990s. I had a costume designer once who said that she thinks that the time when you're paying the most attention, like when you're a teenager and in your as a young adult, that's when people tend to pay the most attention to clothing, and that's when they're kind of finding themselves. I mean, I know as costume designers, we're always paying attention to clothing, but I think that's when you're like really dialed into like choosing who you're going to be. And for me, that was the 90s. So I just always have a soft spot for the 90s. And then as a personal project, if I could like make my own project, I'm Japanese Canadian. So I think costume wise, it would be very interesting. My grandparents were born in Canada, actually, and then they were interned during the Second World War. So if there was an epic, and, Snow Falling on Cedars has been made, but starting from great grandparents in Japan to immigrating to Canada to losing everything during the war and then to having to rebuild, would be a very interesting project, both personally and for costume.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being with us today and for talking about all of your very unique, wide-ranging work and sharing your knowledge of the craft with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.